The safe was heavier than Ethan expected, its cold steel biting into his palms as he carried it down the creaking stairs of his childhood home. He was 24, but in that moment, he felt like a thief in his own house, heart pounding as if the walls themselves might betray him. Every step echoed with the fear that his mother, Ruth, would round the corner and demand to know what he was hiding. It wasn't just books in that safe. It was his truth pages of queer stories, dog-eared novels about boys who loved boys, essays on identity, and a single rainbow wristband he'd never dared to wear. Ethan had grown up in Willow Creek, a speck of a town in Nebraska where church bells rang louder than dreams and pride flags were as rare as rain in July. His mother's faith was a fortress, her Bible a map for a life he couldn't follow. So, he'd locked his heart away, burying it in a second-hand safe he'd bought at a flea market. Its combination 0613. His birthday is only act of defiance. Ethan, you're going to be late. His best friend, Lila, leaned against the front door, her red hair catching the sunlight like a warning flare. She was the only one who knew about the safe, the books, the truth. She'd been his shield since high school, when she'd caught him staring too long at a boy in gym class and, instead of judgment, offered him a grin and a promise to keep his secret. Now, she was here to help him move to Chicago, where he could finally breathe, maybe even live as himself. "I'm coming," Ethan muttered, adjusting his grip on the safe. He glanced back at the living room, where his mother's cross-stitched proverbs lined the walls. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart." The words felt like a warning now. He hurried past, the safe thudding against his chest. Outside, the summer air was thick, the kind that clung to your skin and made secrets feel heavier. Lila's beat-up pickup truck idled in the driveway, packed with Ethan's life, a suitcase, a guitar he barely played, and the safe that held his soul. "You sure about this?" Lila asked, her voice soft but sharp, like she could see the war raging in his head. Ethan nodded, though his stomach twisted. Chicago was a dreamless city where he could walk into a bookstore and buy a novel about two men in love without whispering, without fear. But leaving meant abandoning his mother, who'd raised him alone after his dad walked out when he was 6. Ruth was a woman of iron and faith, her love as fierce as her convictions. She'd never understand who he was. He wasn't sure he could bear her rejection. As he slid the safe into the truck's bed, a shadow moved on the porch. Ruth stood there, her graying hair pulled tight, her eyes narrow. "Were you taking that?" she asked, her voice cutting through the humid air. Ethan froze. "Just stuff for the move," he lied, his throat tight. Lila stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm aside. "I've got you." Ruth's gaze lingered on the safe, then flicked to Lila, who stared back with unapologetic defiance. "You be careful in that city," Ruth said finally, her tone heavy with something Ethan couldn't name: worry, suspicion, or both. She turned back inside, the screen door slamming like a gavel. Lila climbed into the driver's seat, her voice low. "She's gonna find out, Ethan, one way or another." "I know," he whispered, staring at the house as it shrank in the rearview mirror. He didn't know then that his mother had already found the key to his safe, that she'd opened it the night before while he slept, her hands trembling as she read the titles of his books, her heart breaking as she placed a small wooden cross inside, where his pride used to be. The drive to Chicago was a blur of cornfields and silence. Ethan clutched the safe in his lap, its weight a reminder of everything he was leaving behind and everything he was running toward. Lila tried to lighten the mood, blasting her favorite punk playlist, but Ethan's thoughts were elsewhere. He imagined his mother's face when she realized he was gone, the way her lips would tighten, the way she'd pray for his soul. He wondered if she'd ever forgive him. They stopped at a gas station just outside Des Moines, the neon lights buzzing in the dusk. Lila hopped out to fill the tank, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He ran his fingers over the safe's dial, tempted to open it, to check that his books were still there, that his truth hadn't vanished. But he didn't. Not yet. "You okay?" Lila asked when she returned, sliding into the seat with a bag of chips and 2 sodas. Her green eyes searched his face, seeing more than he wanted her to. "Yeah," he lied, taking a soda. "Just thinking about what's next." "Next is freedom," she said, her voice fierce. "You get to be you, Ethan. No more hiding." He wanted to believe her, but freedom felt like a fragile thing, like a glass ornament that could shatter with one wrong move. He'd spent years hiding not just from his mother, but from himself. In Willow Creek, he'd been the quiet kid who helped at church, who mowed lawns for neighbors, who never dated because he couldn't trust his heart to stay silent. Chicago was a chance to change that, but it scared him as much as it thrilled him. By the time they reached the city, night had fallen, and Chicago's skyline glittered like a promise. Lila's cousin, Marcus, had offered Ethan a spare room in his apartment in Wicker Park, a neighborhood buzzing with art and life. Marcus was openly gay, a fact Lila had mentioned casually, but it sent a jolt through Ethan. He'd never met someone who lived their truth so fearlessly. Marcus greeted them at the door, a tall man with a warm smile and a rainbow pin on his jacket. "Welcome to the big city," he said, pulling Ethan into a hug that felt too easy, too kind. Ethan stiffened and used a touch that wasn't laced with expectation. "Thanks for letting me crash," Ethan said, setting the safe down by the couch. Marcus's eyes flicked to it, curious, but he didn't ask. Instead, he handed Ethan a key and a takeout menu. "Make yourself at home," Marcus said. "And tomorrow, I'm taking you to Boys Town. You need to see what real pride looks like." Ethan's heart skipped. Boys Town. He'd heard of Eden neighborhood, where queer people lived openly, where love wasn't a secret. The thought made him dizzy with longing and fear. He glanced at Lila, who grinned like she'd won a bet. "See," she said. "Told you this was the right move." That night, Ethan lay on the couch, the safe beside him like a lifeline. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The books inside were more than stories, they were proof he wasn't alone. That somewhere in the world, people like him existed, loved, thrived. But as he drifted to sleep, he couldn't shake the image of his mother's cross, waiting back home, a silent judgment he wasn't ready to face. The Chicago morning was loud car horns, voices, the hum of a city that never slept. Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through Marcus's apartment window, the safe still beside him, a silent sentinel. He felt like he'd crossed a border into a new world, one where he didn't know the rules but desperately wanted to learn them. Marcus was already up, brewing coffee in a kitchen cluttered with art prints and rainbow mugs. "Sleep okay?" he asked, his voice warm but probing, like he could sense Ethan's unease. "Yeah, thanks," Ethan said, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. He glanced at the safe, wondering if Marcus would ask about it. He didn't, but his gaze lingered, curious and knowing. Lila burst through the door, her energy a stark contrast to Ethan's hesitation. "Ready for your big gay adventure?" she teased, tossing him a bagel. "Marcus is going to show you the ropes. I've got a job interview, but I'll catch up later." Ethan's stomach churned. Boys Town. The idea of walking into a place so openly queer felt like stepping onto a stage without a script. But Marcus's easy confidence was infectious, and by the time they hit the streets, Ethan felt a flicker of courage. Boys Town was everything Willow Creek wasn't. Rainbow flags fluttered from lampposts, and couples, men with men, women with women, walked hand in hand, unafraid. Ethan's eyes darted everywhere, drinking in the sight of a world he'd only dreamed of. Marcus led him to a bookstore, its windows plastered with posters for queer authors and pride events. "Go on," Marcus said, nudging him toward the shelves. "Pick something out." "My treat." Ethan hesitated, then stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. The air smelled of paper and possibility. He ran his fingers along the spine's novels. Memoirs. Poetry. All celebrating identities he'd been taught to hide. He chose a book about two boys finding love in a small town. Its cover bold with color. It felt like a rebellion to hold it openly. At the counter, the cashier, a young man with a lip ring and a bright smile, flirted lightly with Marcus, who laughed easily. Ethan watched, mesmerized by their comfort, their freedom. He wanted that. He wanted to stand in his truth without looking over his shoulder. Back at the apartment, Ethan finally opened the safe. He needed to add the new book, to make room for this piece of himself he'd claimed. But when he spun the dial and lifted the lid, his breath caught. There, on top of his carefully stacked novels, was a small wooden cross, its edges worn smooth. His mother's cross. His heart stopped. She'd found it. She'd known. The realization hit like a fist, stealing his air. When had she done this? The night before he left. Had she read the books, seen the wristband, understood what they meant? And the cross, what was it? A plea. A condemnation. "Ethan." Marcus's voice broke through, gentle but concerned. He stood in the doorway, his eyes flicking to the safe. "You okay?" Ethan slammed the safe shut, his hands shaking. "Yeah. Just stuff from home." Marcus didn't push, but his silence was heavy, like he could feel the weight of Ethan's secret. Lila returned an hour later, her interview a success, but her smile faded when she saw Ethan's face. "What happened?" she asked, dropping onto the couch beside him. He told her about the cross, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila's eyes blazed. "She had no right," she said, her fists clenched. "That's your truth, Ethan. She doesn't get to judge it." But Ethan wasn't so sure. Ruth's faith wasn't just a belief, it was her anchor, her way of surviving a world that had taken her husband, her youth, her dreams. He'd seen her pray through tears, her Bible worn from years of devotion. The cross wasn't just a symbol. It was her love, warped by fear, placed where his pride used to be. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept seeing his mother's face, imagining her opening the safe, her hands trembling as she read titles like "Call Me by Your Name" and "Genderqueer." Did she cry? Did she pray? Did she hate him now? He texted her, his fingers hovering over the screen. "I'm safe in Chicago. Love you." No response came. The next day, Marcus took Ethan to a queer coffee shop, where baristas wore pronoun pins and the walls were covered in murals of love and resistance. Ethan met Jamal, a trans artist with a quick laugh and a knack for making everyone feel seen. Jamal invited him to an open mic night, where Ethan, on a whim, signed up to read a poem he'd written in Secreta Raw, aching piece about hiding who you love. As he stood on the stage, his voice trembling, the room was quiet, listening. He spoke of locked safes, of a mother's cross, of a boy who wanted to be free. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, and Jamal pulled him into a hug. "You're one of us," he said, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, a spark of belonging. But back at the apartment, his phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. "Come home, Ethan. We need to talk." His heart sank. He knew what talk meant. It was a summons, a reckoning. He showed the text to Lila, who shook her head. "You don't owe her anything," she said. "Not after what she did." Marcus, though, was quieter. "Maybe she's trying," he said. "Maybe she's scared too." Ethan didn't know what to believe. He wanted to stay in Chicago, to build a life where he could be himself. But the cross in his safe felt like a tether, pulling him back to Willow Creek, to a mother who loved him but might never accept him. Ethan stared at his phone, his mother's text glowing like a warning. "Come home, Ethan. We need to talk." The words looped in his mind, each syllable heavy with dread. He imagined her sitting at the kitchen table, her Bible open, her voice steady as she told him he was wrong, sinful, broken. He didn't reply. Instead, he shoved the phone into his pocket and followed Marcus and Jamal to a pride event in Boys Town, a street festival bursting with color and music. Rainbow flags waved above food trucks, and drag queens strutted through crowds of laughing, dancing people. Ethan felt like an outsider and a pilgrim all at once, drawn to the joy but afraid to claim it. Jamal noticed his hesitation. "First pride's always overwhelming," he said, handing Ethan a rainbow sticker. "Stick it on. Own it." Ethan pressed the sticker to his jacket, his fingers trembling. It felt like a declaration, one he wasn't sure he was ready to make. But when a group of teens ran by, their faces painted with glitter, shouting, "We're here. We're queer," Ethan's heart swelled. This was what he'd been searching for, a place where love didn't have to hide. Marcus introduced him to more people, a lesbian couple who ran a bakery, a non-binary poet who performed at open mics, a drag king named Riley who offered Ethan a sip of their beer. Each conversation chipped away at his fear, replacing it with possibility. Riley, with their sharp jawline and easy charm, lingered longer, their eyes catching Ethan's in a way that made his pulse race. "You're new to this, huh?" Riley said, their voice teasing but kind. "Don't worry. We all start somewhere." Ethan blushed, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to flirtation, to someone seeing him so clearly. He mumbled something about moving from Nebraska, and Riley's eyes softened. "Small towns can be brutal," they said. "But you're here now. That's what counts." The festival stretched into the night, and Ethan let himself get swept up in it. He danced with Jamal, laughed with Marcus, and even let Riley pull him into a slow sway under the streetlights. For the first time, he felt like he belonged not just to a place, but to himself. But the safe waited back at the apartment, its contents a reminder of the home he'd left behind. When he returned, drunk on music and possibility, he opened it again. The cross was still there, stark against the colorful book covers. He picked it up, its weight heavier than it should have been. He wanted to throw it away, to burn it, to erase the guilt it carried. But it was his mother's, and that made it sacred, even if it hurt. Lila called the next morning, her voice urgent. "Ethan, your mom's been texting me. She's freaking out. Says she needs to see you." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," Lila said. "But she's not stupid. She knows something's up. You can't keep dodging her." He knew she was right, but the thought of facing Ruth terrified him. He imagined her standing in his old bedroom, the safe open, her hands clutching the books as if they were evidence of a crime. He wondered what she'd felt: anger, betrayal, grief. Did she think she'd failed him? Marcus suggested writing her a letter. "Say what you need to say," he said. "You don't have to send it, but it might help you figure out what you want." So Ethan wrote. He sat at Marcus's kitchen table, a notebook in front of him, and poured out his heart. He wrote about the boy he'd loved in high school, a crush he'd never confessed. He wrote about the fear that had kept him silent, the shame that had made him hide. He wrote about Chicago, about pride, about wanting to be whole. And he wrote about her, how he loved her, how he feared her judgment, how he hoped she could love him back. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush, each one a release. When he finished, he felt lighter, like he'd unlocked a piece of himself. He didn't send the letter, but he kept it in the safe, next to the cross, a fragile truce between his past and his future. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan settled into Chicago. He got a job at the queer bookstore, shelving novels and chatting with customers who felt like family. He went to more open mics, reading poems that grew bolder, more honest. Riley started showing up at the bookstore, their banter turning into coffee dates, then quiet evenings at Ethan's apartment. Riley was patient, never pushing, but their presence was a steady warmth, a reminder that love could be kind. But Ruth's texts kept coming, each one more insistent. "Ethan, please. I'm your mother." He ignored them, but the guilt gnawed at him. He wasn't ready to face her, not when he was still learning who he was, not when the cross still sat in his safe. A silent accusation. One night, Riley found him staring at it. "What's this?" they asked, their voice gentle. Ethan hesitated, then told them everything about the safe, the books, his mother, the cross. Riley listened, their hand resting on his, their eyes steady. "You don't have to carry that alone," they said, "but you do have to decide what it means to you." Ethan didn't have an answer. Not yet. But Riley's words stayed with him, a seed of courage taking root. Ethan's life in Chicago began to take shape, a fragile mosaic of new experiences and old fears. The bookstore became his sanctuary, its shelves a map of stories he was learning to claim as his own. He spent his days ringing up customers, recommending books, and stealing glances at Riley, who'd started dropping by during his shifts. Their flirtation was a slow burn, each smile and touch a step towards something Ethan hadn't dared to dream of, love that didn't hide. But the safe sat in Marcus's apartment, a shadow he couldn't shake. Every time he opened it to add a new book or reread a favorite, the cross stared back, a reminder of his mother's discovery. He hadn't responded to her texts, and her messages had grown sparse, each one a quiet plea. "Ethan, just call me. Please." He wanted to, but the words wouldn't come. What could he say to a woman who'd left a cross in place of his pride? One evening, Riley invited him to a drag show at a club in Boys Town. The place was electric glitter, music, and laughter spilling into the street. Ethan watched performers command the stage, their confidence a stark contrast to the boy who'd hidden his truth in a safe. Riley leaned close, their breath warm against his ear. "You could be up there one day," they teased. "You've got a poet's soul." Ethan laughed, but the idea stuck. He wasn't ready for a stage, but he was starting to feel ready for himself. After the show, he and Riley walked through the city, the night alive with possibility. At a quiet corner, Riley stopped, their eyes searching his. "Can I kiss you?" they asked. Ethan's heart raced. He'd never kissed anyone. Not like this. Not with intention. He nodded, and Riley's lips met his, soft and sure. It was a moment of pure freedom, a defiance of every fear he'd carried. When they pulled back, Riley grinned. "Took you long enough." Ethan laughed, his chest light. But the joy was fleeting. When he checked his phone, there was a voicemail from Ruth. Her voice was shaky. "Raw. Ethan, I found your books. I don't understand, but I want to. Please come home." He played the message again, then a third time, each word a knife. She didn't understand, but she wanted to. Was that enough? He showed the message to Riley, who listened quietly. "What do you want to do?" they asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I'm scared she'll reject me. But I'm scared to lose her too." Riley squeezed his hand. "You don't have to decide tonight. But you're not alone in this." The next day, Ethan called Lila, who was now working at a music shop downtown. "She sounds different," Lila said after hearing the voicemail. "Like she's trying. But you need to protect yourself, Ethan. If you go back, set boundaries." Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. Boundaries. The word felt foreign, like something he'd never been allowed to have. Growing up, His mother's love had been a tide overwhelming, all-consuming, pulling him under. He'd never learned to say no, to carve out space for himself. But Chicago was teaching him that. He decided to write another letter, this one to send. He sat at the bookstore during his break, the words coming easier now. He told Ruth about his life in Chicago, about the bookstore, about the pride he was starting to feel. He told her he was gay, the words stark on the page, a truth he'd never spoken aloud to her. He asked her to listen, to try to understand, to love him as he was. He mailed it before he could change his mind, his heart pounding as he dropped it into the mailbox. It felt like letting go of the safe, like trusting the world with his truth. Days passed with no response. Ethan threw himself into his new life work. Open mics, late nights with Riley. They were building something real, something that made Ethan feel seen. But the silence from his mother was a weight, a question mark hanging over every moment of joy. Then, one morning, a package arrived. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, with his mother's handwriting on the label. Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single book of memoir by a queer Christian, its pages marked with sticky notes. A letter was tucked inside, Ruth's handwriting small and careful. Ethan, I read your letter. I'm trying to understand. I don't know if I can, but I love you. I'm sorry about the cross. I was scared. Come home when you're ready. Mom. He read it again, tears blurring the words. She was trying. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. He showed the letter to Riley, who smiled softly. That's something, they said. It's a door opening. Ethan nodded, clutching the book. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time, he felt like he could face it. He added the book to his safe, next to the cross, a new piece of his story taking shape. Ethan carried his mother's letter with him, tucked into his jacket pocket like a talisman. Her words, I am trying to understand, were a fragile bridge between them, one he wasn't sure he could cross. But they gave him hope, a flicker of light in the uncertainty that had defined his life for so long. At the bookstore, he found himself drawn to the memoir she'd sent. He read it during quiet shifts, the author's story of reconciling faith and queerness mirroring his own struggle. The sticky notes Ruth had left were filled with questions. Some hesitant, some sharp. How do you balance this with God? Is this really who you are? Each note was a glimpse into her heart, a mix of love and fear that made Ethan ache. Riley noticed the change in him. You're quieter, they said one night, as they sat on Marcus's couch, sharing a pizza, thinking about her. Yeah, Ethan admitted. I want to go back, but I'm scared. What if she can't accept me? Riley took his hand, their touch steady. Then you'll still have you. And you've got Usme, Marcus, Lila, the whole messy queer family you're building. Ethan smiled, but the fear lingered. He'd built a life in Chicago, one where he could be himself. But Willow Creek was still home. It was where he'd learned to love, to hurt, to hide. He couldn't move forward without facing it. He called Lila, who was blunt as always. Go, she said. But don't let her guilt you into being someone you're not. You fought too hard for this. So Ethan booked a bus ticket back to Nebraska, his heart a tangle of hope and dread. He packed light, but the safe came with him, its contents a reminder of who he was. Riley drove him to the station, kissing him softly before he boarded. You've got this, they said, and I'll be here when you get back. The bus ride was long, the flat landscape stretching endlessly outside the window. Ethan reread his mother's letter, tracing her words, searching for clues to what awaited him. When he arrived in Willow Creek, the town felt smaller, its quiet streets a stark contrast to Chicago's vibrancy. He walked to the house, the safe heavy in his arms, his heart heavier still. Ruth was waiting on the porch, her face softer than he remembered. She stood as he approached, her hands twisting nervously. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "You came." He nodded, unsure what to say. They went inside. The house unchanged, same proverbs on the walls. Same smell of coffee and old wood. They sat at the kitchen table, the silence thick between them. "I read your letter," Ruth said finally. I didn't know. All those years. You were hiding this." Ethan swallowed, his throat tight. "I had to. I didn't think you'd understand." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't," she admitted. "Not fully. But I'm trying. I love you, Ethan. I don't want to lose you." He wanted to believe her, but the cross in his safe loomed in his mind. "Why did you put it there?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The cross. Why?" Ruth's hands trembled. "I was scared," she said. I thought it would protect you. From sin. From pain. I was wrong." The admission hit Ethan like a wave. He'd expected anger, denial, anything but this. He opened the safe, pulling out the cross and setting it on the table. "This hurt me," he said. "It felt like you were erasing who I am." Ruth reached for the cross, then stopped, her hand hovering. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I thought I was saving you. But I see now. I was pushing you away." They talked for hours, the conversation raw and halting. Ethan told her about Chicago, about the bookstore, about Riley. He told her what it meant to be gay, to feel whole for the first time. Ruth listened, her face a map of conflict, love warring with belief, fear warring with hope. She asked questions, some clumsy, some painful, but she asked. And that was enough for now. When Ethan left, they hugged, a tentative embrace that held both their fears and their love. "Come back soon," Ruth said. "And bring that Riley. I want to meet them." Ethan smiled, tears in his eyes. "I will." Back in Chicago, Ethan felt different, lighter, but not unburdened. The trip to Willow Creek had opened a door, but it wasn't fully ajar. His mother's effort to understand was a start, but trust would take time. He carried the safe back to Marcus's apartment, its contents now a mix of pain and possibility. Riley was waiting for him, their smile bright but cautious. "How'd it go?" they asked, pulling him into a hug. "Better than I expected," Ethan said, his voice soft. "She's trying. It's not perfect, but it's something." Riley nodded, their hand lingering on his. "That's all you can ask for right now?" Ethan threw himself back into his life, determined to build on the courage he'd found. He started performing more at open mics, his poems growing sharper, more confident. He wrote about his mother, about the cross, about the safe that had held his truth. The crowds listened, their applause a balm to his wounds. At the bookstore, he organized a reading event for queer authors, inviting Jamal and other local artists. The turnout was bigger than he'd hoped, the room packed with people who saw him, who understood. Riley was there, cheering louder than anyone, their pride in him a warmth he could feel across the room. But the safe remained a constant. He didn't need it anymore, not in the same way, but he couldn't let it go. It was a piece of his story, a reminder of how far he'd come. He added new books to it, ones he bought openly, proudly. The cross stayed too, a symbol he was learning to reframe not as judgment, but as a step in his mother's journey. One evening, Ruth called. Her voice was nervous but warm. "I've been reading that book I sent you," she said. "It's hard, but it's helping me see things differently. I want to understand. Ethan." He smiled, tears prickling his eyes. "I'm glad, Mom. I'm really glad." She asked about Riley, about Chicago, about his life. For the first time, Ethan felt like he could answer honestly, without fear. He told her about the bookstore, about his poems, about the pride flag he'd hung in his room. She didn't flinch, didn't judge. She just listened. After the call, Ethan sat with Riley, the safe open between them. He picked up the cross, turning it over in his hands. "I think I'm ready to let this go," he said. "Not her, not my past. Just the pain it carries." Riley nodded. "What do you want to do with it?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I want to give it back to her. Not as a rejection, but as a way to move forward. Together." They planned a trip to Willow Creek, this time with Riley. Ethan was nervous, but he felt ready to show his mother who he was, who he loved. He packed the safe one last time. The cross nestled among his books, a symbol of a bridge being built. The drive to Willow Creek was different this time. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, Riley behind the wheel, the safe in the back of the car. The Nebraska landscape rolled by, familiar but no longer suffocating. Ethan felt like he was returning as himself, not the boy who'd hidden his truth. Riley reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "You nervous?" they asked. "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "But not like before. This feels right." They arrived at the house just as the sun was setting, the sky streaked with pink and gold. Ruth was waiting on the porch, her face a mix of hope and fear. When she saw Riley, she hesitated, then stepped forward, offering a small smile. "You must be Riley," she said. Riley nodded, their charm disarming. "Good to meet you. MS. Carter. Ethan's told me a lot about you." Ruth's eyes softened, and she led them inside. The kitchen table was set with coffee and homemade pie, a gesture that felt like an olive branch. They sat, the air thick with possibility. Ethan set the safe on the floor beside him, its presence a quiet anchor. "I'm sorry," Ruth said, her voice steady but emotional. "For the cross. For not understanding. I was raised to believe certain things. But I see you now, Ethan. I want to keep seeing you." Ethan's throat tightened. He reached into the safe, pulling out the cross and setting it on the table. "I brought this back," he said. "Not because I don't want it, but because I want us to start over. I want you to know meal of me." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. She reached for the cross, then for Ethan's hand. "I'm trying," she said. "I love you. That's never changed." Riley squeezed Ethan's knee under the table, a silent "I'm proud of you." The conversation flowed slowly, awkwardly at times, but it flowed. Ruth asked Riley about their life, their art, their family. She asked Ethan about his poems, about Chicago. She didn't shy away from the hard questions, and Ethan answered them honestly. When they left, Ruth hugged them both, her embrace fierce and warm. "Come back soon," she said. "Both of you." On the drive back to Chicago, Ethan felt a weight lift. The safe was still in the car, but it wasn't a hiding place anymore. It was a keepsake, a record of his journey. He looked at Riley, at the road ahead, and knew he was home not in a place, but in himself. Back in the city, Ethan hung a pride flag in his apartment, right next to a photo of him and his mother, taken years ago when he was a kid. The cross sat on a shelf, no longer a burden, but a reminder of love's complexity. He was building a life where he could be whole, where his pride and his past could coexist. And as he stood on the stage at the next open mic, reading a poem about a boy who found his truth, he knew he'd made it. Not to a destination, but to a beginning.